I think mine's level. Oh my goodness. Kobe, mine's perfect.
Good morning. If anyone happened to find a phone in the men's restroom, if you would bring it to me, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
out all the workforces are coming up behind you.
Good morning. On behalf of the administration, faculty, and staff of Nettleton Public Schools and Nettleton High School, we would like to welcome you to the Veterans Program presented by Nettleton High School East. We'd also like to take this opportunity to thank today's sponsor, First Community Bank.
May you please stand for the presentation of colors presented by the ASU Artistic and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem played by the NHS Band.
Should I get the flag? Oh crap, is there? This doesn't feel like a good shot to me. Should I just get the whole stage?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Face forward, march, that's it, march. Forward, march.
Welcome to Nettleton.
Please be seated. Welcome to Nettleton High School and to our Veterans Day program. A sweet salute to all of our veterans. Today we want to honor all of our service members and the sacrifices you've made to defend our country. Thank you to all the heroes who have joined us today and those who are only in spirit. A person can't help but to feel awed by all we encounter today. We stand among all the patriots and the family and friends of those who have nobly served. Thank you for answering the call of duty. You have made our armed forces the most respected in the world. We also want to thank our family members because we know you've lived through hard times and often took the heavy load to keep the home fires burning. Thank you for what you've done.
The service members we honor today came from all walks of life, but they all possess the same fundamental qualities. They possess courage, pride, determination, selflessness, dedication to duty, and integrity. They didn't ask to fight in foreign battlefields. They didn't volunteer, some of them. They didn't go to war because they loved fighting. They were called to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They were ordinary people who responded in extraordinary ways in extreme times. They rose to the nation's call because they wanted to protect the nation, which has given them and us so much. Today our troops continue to make the ultimate sacrifices. And even as we lose more troops, more Americans step forward to say, I'm ready to serve. They follow in the footsteps of generations of fine Americans. Today, we celebrate the veterans who are keeping this nation the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you for attending today. God bless you and your families. God bless our troops, and God bless America.
Folks, even knew his name.
Good morning, everybody. To begin with, I want to say thank you. Without men and women like you, we would not be free. This freedom is guaranteed to every American. When I think about what it means to be a veteran, I think about the sacrifices they have made. A sacrifice that shouldn't be taken in vain. Sacrifice that should give every single American hope. Veterans Day is celebrated at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. It is a moment where we stop to thank our veterans, pray for our veterans, and honor our veterans. I don't think one day is enough. Every single one of you, when you raised that right hand, you said you would defend our Constitution. Knowing that death may be the result, you went out and gave your all every day. To keep freedom alive on our soul, you sacrificed. We should honor you every day. We have with us today veterans from many different wars. No matter what war you served in, you dedicated your life for our freedom. Freedom is one idea that was born with America. The idea that every man is created equal was in the mind of those who came before us, and this freedom is still being fought for today. Many times in my life, I've heard the phrase, freedom is not free. You all know that phrase and know its truth very personally. It comes at a costly price. That price is the sacrifices that y'all made. It is one of the greatest sacrifices one can make. Because of your sacrifice, we owe each and every one of you a lifelong gratitude. You fought for us. You defended your beliefs of what makes this country great. You battled for us when times were tough. You pushed through the fog of war, not knowing what could be on the other side. But most importantly, you kept America free. It wasn't an easy task, but it is one that a veteran has done and should make you proud. I know we are very thankful and proud of you. Because of you, the United States of America remains a free country, and through the sacrifices of those to come, will remain for future generations. Freedom should not be taken for granted. We'd like to say thank you all for your service. You're an inspiration to us all. Thank you.
With a different step and we talk with a different voice and we love with a tender heart and we give with open arms. I believe every step that I take is my freedom that you can't take away. I believe in all the blood, sweat, and tears shed to give to the world all these years. We cry for heroes we lose in the fight, for our freedom to choose, and they die with honor and dignity. So fly your flag way up high. I believe every step that I take is my freedom that you can't take away. I believe in all the blood, sweat, and tears shed to give to the world all these years.
John 15:13 states, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends." Today, we bow our heads in silence for the men and women we lost in war.
We remember and appreciate the ultimate sacrifices they made. From leaving their families to moving halfway across the world, their dedication doesn't go unnoticed.
Today, we honor the great soldiers who laid down their lives for the freedom of this great nation. We don't know them all, but we owe them all.
They each left a footprint of freedom on this earth. Today we honor you, the people sitting here today, a living, breathing example of courage, loyalty, honor, commitment, and integrity.
It is with deepest gratitude that we remember each of you. Thank you.
I walked through a county courthouse square. On a park bench, I saw an old man sitting there. I said, "Your old courthouse is kind of run down." He said, "Nah, it'll do for our little town." I said, "Your old flagpole is leaned a little bit, and that's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it." He said, "Have a seat," and I sat down. "Is this the first time you've ever been to our little town?" I said, "I think it is." He said, "Well, I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag up there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And it got powder burned the night that Francis Scott Key sat watching it, writing, 'Say, can you see?' And she got a bad rip at New Orleans with Jackson and Packingham tugging at her seams. And she almost fell at the Alamo, besides the Texas flag, but she waved on, though. She got cut by a sword at Chancellorsville. She got cut by another one at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee and Beauregard and Bragg, and the southern wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. In Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung low and limp a time or two. She was in Korea, Vietnam. She went where she was sent by our Uncle Sam. She waved from our ships upon the briny foam, and now they've about quit waving her back here at home. In her own good land here, she's been abused. She's been burned, desecrated, denied, and refused. And the government for which she stands is now scandalized throughout the land. And she's getting threadbare and she's wearing kind of thin, but she's in good shape for the shape she's in. Because she's been through the fire before, and I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up early every single morning and we take her down every night. We don't ever let her hit the floor, and we fold her upright. On second thought, I do like to brag, because I'm mighty proud of that ragged old flag.
In 1918, a war raged in Europe, the likes of which the world had never seen. A war involving dozens of nations, millions of soldiers, a war with global implications. A war that resulted in an estimated 20 million deaths. At 11 a.m. on November 11th, 1918, the guns fell silent. For a brief historical moment, there was the hope the world would never have to endure another such conflict, that lessons would be learned, and this great war would, in fact, be the war to end all war. Over the next few years, November 11th would be commemorated in several nations as Armistice Day, an occasion to recognize the commitment and sacrifice of so many during World War I, a time to celebrate victory and remember loss. Sadly, there would be other wars. World War II was larger and more devastating than the Great War. In its wake, as the tensions of the Cold War shaped the world's political environment, the service of millions of men and women were required to deter aggression and protect U.S. interests. Following World War II, Norman Weeks, a Navy veteran, proposed that Armistice Day be used as an occasion to recognize the service of all veterans, not just those from the First World War. Although it would take several years, Weeks lobbied and petitioned the government to redesignate Armistice Day as a national holiday to recognize all Americans who served in the military. In 1954, legislation was enacted to redesignate Armistice Day as Veterans Day. It has become part of an important trio of observances for the military. Veterans Day for those who previously served, Armed Forces Day for those who currently serve, and Memorial Day for those who gave their lives in military service. While U.S. history recounts involvements in conflicts around the world, as we recognize the service of our veterans, let us remember that their ultimate charge is peace. Their service and their sacrifice has been to keep the country safe and to promote very basic but very important principles of freedom and security throughout the world. The contributions of our servicemen and women extend far beyond the battlefield. Active duty, reserve, and National Guard units have frequently been called upon to render service in times of need, both at home and abroad. In recent years, service personnel have assisted in fighting wildfires in the West. When tornadoes strike, they are called upon to aid with search and rescue, conduct damage assessment, as well as assist law enforcement agencies in ensuring the safety and security of affected areas. When COVID struck, the Navy ships Mercy and Comfort rendered assistance to affected cities. We know that hurricanes strike our Caribbean neighbors with alarming frequency. On numerous occasions, the U.S. military has been called upon to assist them through airlifting humanitarian relief. When Ebola struck Liberia and West Africa, the U.S. Army aided in the construction of medical facilities there. This service is part of our history. In the early days of the Cold War, West Berlin was isolated by a communist blockade. The U.S. Air Force flew in millions of tons of critical supplies for over a year to protect the city's freedom. Here in Arkansas in 1957, U.S. Army and National Guard troops were called upon to protect the rights and safety of students during the Central High crisis. Service members have been part of some of the nation's greatest accomplishments. When the nation decided to explore the realms of space, the first astronauts were all veterans of military service. And when those astronauts returned to Earth, the Navy recovered the men in their spacecraft. We sometimes take for granted very important tasks performed by the military that keep our world running smoothly every day. The humanitarian and security missions of the Coast Guard help ensure our maritime connections with the rest of the world. And in our part of the country, the Army Corps of Engineers is vital to maintaining our navigable waterways. Members of the military have also shown specific commitment to children. During the Berlin airlift, the candy bomber, Lieutenant Gail Halverson, dropped packages of candy to groups of children that gathered near the runways at Tempelhof Airport. Since 1947, the Marine Corps Reserve has operated the Toys for Tots program for needy children. And for decades, NORAD has used its technology to help children keep track of Santa's progress on Christmas Eve. The men and women who have served in the various branches of the military are extraordinary. In ways we often fail to recognize, they support the nation. They are the living embodiment of duty. Their efforts improve the quality and standard of life for us all. Although we may not know it, these everyday heroes are always around us. They run businesses, they teach school, they stand next to us and check out aisles, sit next to us in church, and cheer next to us in ball games. And while we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to our veterans, I think it's also important to recognize their spouses and families as well, who often help carry the weight of sacrifice that comes with military service. For all of our veterans and your families, thank you.
so merry. There's a man who plays a concertina on the moonlit upper deck arena. Sing, 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 sing. Everybody start to sing. Ooh, wow, now you're singing with a swing. Sing, 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 sing. Everybody start to sing. Ooh, wow, now you're singing with a swing.
It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Brian Levins. Mr. Levins was born in Blytheville, Arkansas. He graduated from Mark Tree High School in 1999. Mr. Levins joined the Marines in March 2005. He was stationed at Camp Pendleton, California with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment. He was deployed in Iraq in 2006 and again in 2007 and 2008. In 2009, he left the Marines as a sergeant. Since leaving the Marines, he has lived in Jonesboro. Him and his wife Shelby have 3 children. 2 of his children attend school at Nettleton, and their youngest child is a 2-year-old. Mr. Levins has been teaching and coaching for 8 years. He is currently teaching criminal justice at NHS and coaches high school football and girls track. Please welcome Mr. Brian Levins.
Good morning. I want to tell y'all, when Ms. Taylor first asked me to speak today, I don't think I've ever said no to anything so fast in my life. I think I hurt her feelings a little bit and definitely caught her off guard, but the more I thought about it, the more it kind of weighed on me, and I thought, I don't know, I felt like it was something I should do, so I came back and told her I'd do it. So my next question was, what do I talk about? Who am I to talk to a room full of veterans, most with much more experience than me? So I asked Ms. Taylor, what do I talk about? She gave me a few ideas, and one of them kind of stuck with me, and she said, what does it mean to you to be a veteran? I've never thought about that too much until over the past few weeks. To all the veterans in the room, I can't tell you anything you don't already know. I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm a father. I spend pretty much all my time talking to kids. So today I want to direct my comments towards the students in the room. I want to give you a veteran's thoughts on what it is to be a veteran. I hope that, if nothing else, it'll give you a better understanding of an appreciation for those who have been and currently are in the military. So the thought is, what is a veteran? Well, the dictionary defines a veteran as a former member of the armed services. And I think a lot of people's perception is just simply that. And they don't think about what that actually involved. So when I think about what is a veteran, I came up with 5 ideas. Number 1, a veteran is a person who's lived a life of service. The word service has lots of definitions, but all of them have something to do with doing some kind of work for someone else. Living a life of service means dedicating your life to others. When we signed that contract, we were putting every American citizen above ourselves. Also, the thought that we could be sent anywhere in the world and have to serve people from other countries as well. Living a life of service means volunteering. We haven't had a draft in the United States since June 30th of 1973. So every member of the military since then volunteered to join, and many before then volunteered as well. For me personally, I was working a construction job. I dropped out of college, and I was sitting at home watching TV one night, and one of those Marine Corps commercials came on, and I thought, I can do that. So the next morning, I got up and went to the recruiter's office. Living a life of service means knowing what you're getting into. If you joined the military in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, you were pretty much guaranteed to go to Korea or Vietnam. In the late 80s and early 90s, you were going to the Persian Gulf. And if you joined the military after 9/11, you were going to Iraq or Afghanistan. Living a life of service means not doing it for recognition, but to make a difference. One thing that I've always thought to myself is if I can just do one thing to help someone else. Galatians 5:13 says, by love, serve one another. So what is a veteran? A veteran is a person who's lived a life of service, and a veteran is a person who's lived the life of a specialist. When you sign that contract, it says on there what your MOS, your military occupational specialty, will be. And you may have picked that job and you may not have. When I went in the recruiter's office that morning, the first thing he asked me is if I had taken the ASVAB, and I had no idea what an ASVAB was. So I asked him. The ASVAB is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, which is a fancy way of saying it's a test that tells them what kind of jobs you'll be good at. The higher your score, the better job you can get. So I took the ASVAB, made a pretty good score, and my recruiter said, you can pick whatever job you want in the Marine Corps. And so obviously I looked at him and said, I want to be in the infantry. And he called me an idiot. In the civilian world, you go to school, work internships and on-the-job training for months and even years in order to develop the skills to work a particular job. The military sends you to a 6 or 8 week school and you come out an expert. In the civilian world, people clock in and clock out. They go home to their family, kids, hobbies, sometimes side jobs or whatever leisure activities they enjoy. But in the military, your job is your life. 24/7, 365, you are what your MOS is because you have to be that expert. So what is a veteran? A veteran is a person who's lived a life of service, lived a life of a specialist, and a veteran is a person who's lived a life that was steady. I'm going to read a couple of quotes that I got from some veteran websites that describe what it is being a veteran. Being a veteran means you sacrificed a number of years of your life for the privilege of taking orders from those of higher rank than you. It meant performing seemingly endless numbers of push-ups and sit-ups or hiking countless miles while wearing too heavy a rucksack. It meant drills, shooting ranges, GI parties, the party favors for those are mops and brooms, and of course field trips, usually in the rain or cold. It meant mind-numbing hours on guard duty or kitchen patrol. If you managed to earn yourself extra duty by breaking one or more of the numerous regulations, then you had up to 22 hours a day of the same mind-numbing work, followed by a generous 2 hours of sleep. Then you did it all again the next day. Being a veteran means jumping into bed at perfectly rigid attention each night, on a bed with perfectly folded corners that you could bounce a quarter off of, while lying on the top bunk of that gray metal bunk bed on a 100% wool blanket. You and 75 other guys sing in unison the Marine Corps hymn followed by Amazing Grace. The idea is the life that is steady is there's no wondering what or when to do something. Everything is what you're told when you're told. That way you can focus on your job. It's about being structured and organized in everything that you do. So a veteran is a person who's lived a life of service, lived the life of a specialist, lived a life that was steady, and a veteran is a person who's lived a life of support. Life can be stressful. I've told everyone for years that I live a stress-free life, and people laugh at me. They say, how can you be a teacher? How can you be a coach, a husband, and a father, and not have stress in your life? You work with students, their parents, athletes, your own kids, and wife. She's here today. Well, when you've been places and you've seen things and done things that you never could have imagined possible, it changes your priorities. It changes how you view the so-called problems in your life. Military life is stressful. It takes a strong support system. That morning that I got up and drove to the recruiter's office, I called my dad on the way. I wanted his support. I wanted his approval. I didn't tell my mom until after I'd already joined. They're here today as well. While I was in the Marines, I talked to my parents every Sunday afternoon. My wife, who was my girlfriend and then fiance at the time, we spoke every day. She was in college at the time. If I called her, if she was in class, she got up and left class to answer the phone. If she was at work, she left work and answered the phone. If I called in the middle of the night, she woke up and answered the phone. She wanted me to know that she was there for me. My support system also included my two brothers, close friends, and extended family. and of course, my Marine brothers. The closest relationships you'll ever have are people that you live every second of every day with. So a veteran is a person who's lived a life of service, lived a life of a specialist, lived a life that was steady, lived a life of support, and then lastly, a veteran is a person who's lived a life of sacrifice. When you sign that contract, you're giving up your life for a whole new one. You leave your home, your friends, your family, your job, your hobbies. You're sent somewhere else to live with people you don't know, away from your family. You're given a new job that you don't know how to do, but in 6 or 8 weeks you'll be an expert. And you have no time for hobbies. Some people sacrifice getting married and having families. Some people sacrifice going to college or even a good career to join the military. Those are all great sacrifices, but none of them compare to the ultimate sacrifice. Some people sacrifice their very lives. Those who chose to serve and willingly go where others wouldn't go and do what others wouldn't do and lost their lives in the process. That, to me, is the ultimate sacrifice. John 15:13 says, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." And for us, who served with those men, it's up to us to carry on their legacy and make sure their sacrifice isn't forgotten. A veteran is a person who's lived a life of service, lived a life of a specialist, lived a life that was steady, lived a life of support, and lived a life of sacrifice. But I'm speaking to students today, so how can you apply that to your life? Well, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to model your life after the life of a veteran. You can live a life of service. Doesn't mean you have to go out and join the military. It simply means put others before yourself. You can live the life of a specialist. Dedicate yourself to becoming an expert at something. It takes time and effort to master something. Don't sell yourself short by just doing the bare minimum to get by. You can live a life that is steady. Make sure your life has structure. Be disciplined and coordinated in your daily life. You can live a life of support. A structure without support crumbles and falls. Surround yourself with a positive support system that will build you up and hold you up. And you can live a life of sacrifice. Be willing to give up things that you deem important for the greater good. Hebrews 13:16 says, "For with such sacrifices God is well pleased." So students, model your life after the life of a veteran, and I promise you, you will be successful in whatever you do. Back to the veterans in the room, I want to leave you with 2 things today. Number 1, today's November 4th, right? We've got some major holidays coming up, Veterans Day next week, Thanksgiving, Christmas, but before those, in 6 days, we have the most important holiday. So to all my Marine brothers and sisters, happy birthday. And then lastly, there we are. I'm not a big presence on social media. Most of the stuff that I post or share has to do with our school, our students, and our athletic programs, or some random baseball stats from the 80s. But from time to time, I post or share something to do with military life or something that one of my old Marine brothers has posted. And I always end those posts with 3 phrases, and I'm going to leave you with these today. Semper Fidelis, Semper Fortis, Fratres Aeternam. Thank you.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd worked for all my life, bless my family by my side.
I thank my God above to be living here today, 'cause our flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea.
From Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, there's pride in every American heart.
And it's time we stand and say,
It's time we stand and say, I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Oh, God bless the USA. God bless the USA.
It is my pleasure to introduce retired Colonel Corey Seats. Corey Seats was born in Jonesboro, Arkansas. He is a 1988 graduate of Brooklyn High School. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from Arkansas State University in 1992. He received a Juris Doctor degree from the University of Arkansas School of Law in 1999 and a Master's in Strategic Studies degree from the U.S. Army War College in 2017. Colonel Seats was commissioned a second lieutenant in 1992 through the ROTC program at Arkansas State University. After completion of the Air Defense Officer Basic Course at Fort Bliss, Texas, he was assigned as a Vulcan platoon leader. In 1995, Colonel Seats entered the Arkansas Army National Guard and was assigned as Battalion Maintenance Officer in the 875th Engineer Battalion. In 1997, he was selected to command the 875th Battalion's headquarters. After completing command, Colonel Seats was assigned as the 875th Engineer Battalion Logistics Officer. Colonel Seats served as Battalion Operations Officer
from 2002 until 2008, including during the battalion's deployment to Iraq as an Assured Mobility Combat Engineer Battalion. Colonel Seats commanded the 875th Battalion from February 2008 to 2011. Subsequently, he served as G3 Operations Branch Chief, the Deputy Commander of the 233rd Regiment, Arkansas National Guard, the Commander of the 233rd Regiment, and Construction and Facilities Management Officer for the Arkansas National Guard. Most recently, Colonel Seats served as the Arkansas National Guard J7. He retired on July 19, 2022, with over 30 years of service. Corey is a graduate of the U.S. Army Basic Airborne Course, the Air Defense Officer Basic Course, the Engineer Officer Advanced Course, the Combined Arms and Services Staff School, the Command and General Staff College, and the United States Army War College. His awards and decorations include the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Army Commendation Medal with oak leaf cluster, the Humanitarian Service Medal, the Iraqi Campaign Medal with 2 campaign stars, the Global War on Terror Service Medal, the Arkansas Distinguished Service Medal, and the Bronze de Fleury. In his civilian career, Corey is an attorney and was employed as a deputy prosecuting attorney and coordinator for the 2nd Judicial District Drug Task Force for over 21 years. He is also an adjunct law enforcement instructor for the University of Arkansas Criminal Justice Institute in Little Rock, Arkansas. He is married to Andrea Davis, and they reside in Jonesboro, Arkansas with their 2 children, Hannah and John. Please welcome retired Colonel Corey Seats.
Thank you. It's a big honor to be with you here today. First of all, we have a lot of veterans here. I want to say to all of our veterans, thank you for your service. Specifically to the veterans, to my brothers and sisters who served in Vietnam, welcome home. If you served, you know that there's quite a bit of rivalry between the services. The Army, well, we make fun of the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, they make fun of the Navy. And everyone makes fun of the Air Force. I mean, that's just how it is. But also, another thing that all of the services share is a common skepticism toward lieutenants. I was one, and I'll acknowledge it, okay? And many times that skepticism is well-deserved. I recall back to a situation where there was a platoon out training, and they were doing movement to contact and practicing ambushes and all of these cool Army things. And they finished with training for the day, and the lieutenant and his platoon sergeant settled down in their sleeping bags to go to sleep. And the sergeant looked at the lieutenant and he said, "LT, look up. What do you see?" And the lieutenant, who fancied himself as quite the intellectual, said, "Well, from a meteorological standpoint, it's clear outside. I see stars. There are no clouds. It's probably going to be cool tonight. We may have a dew, but we will not have any rain." He looked up further and he said, "From an astrological standpoint, I see millions and millions of stars. I see planets, and recognize that the earth is just a small part of our galaxy. From a theological standpoint, I see that God is huge and we are small, but he takes care of all of us." "Why, Sergeant, what do you see?" And the sergeant said, "Well, LT, I see that somebody stole our tent." The Veterans Administration calls Veterans Day a celebration to honor America's veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. And we've heard today already about the history of Veterans Day and how it came to be, going back to the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. I do want to share this. It was ironic that it showed up on all things on my Facebook feed last night, but it was a picture, and it was titled "The Luckiest Man in the World." It's a draft notice. You know, many of you may know about that. Congratulations, you've been selected by your friends and neighbors. Well, this one, I'm going to read it. "You are hereby notified that you have been selected for military service. You will be called on or about November 11th, 1918. So that was the luckiest man in the world. He was a report for the draft the day that World War I ended. I did notice previously that the correct spelling of Veterans Day does not include an apostrophe. Veterans. It's to be the recognition of all veterans. But in a way, this tends to lump all veterans together in a group. I prefer to think of, when I think of Veterans Day, to think about individual veterans, each with their own stories and their own struggles. Some, when they think of a veteran, may remember famous people in uniform, such as Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders on San Juan Hill in Cuba. They may think about Sergeant York of the All-American Division in World War I, later portrayed by Gary Cooper in the movie Sergeant York. You may think of Audie Murphy of the 3rd Infantry Division, who I think by most accounts was the most decorated soldier in World War II. Later went on to be a movie star. You may think about one of my personal heroes, Indiana, Pennsylvania's own James Maitland Stewart, known by the world as Jimmy Stewart. He actually volunteered and entered service in early 1941. On December 7th, he was a private pulling guard duty at an airfield in California. He fought to get into the war, became a pilot, actually made it to Europe, flew 20 combat missions in a B-24 over Europe. He continued to serve until he retired from the United States Air Force Reserve as a brigadier general in 1968. And I've seen some reports that he was seen there in his later years as a one-star climbing out of a B-52 after it had finished a bombing run over North Vietnam. We may be reminded of famous military commanders, Black Jack Pershing, Douglas MacArthur, George Patton, William Westmoreland, Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf. However, for many of us, and certainly me included, our thoughts of Veterans Day usually focus on someone that was close to us, someone that we knew personally. When I think of Veterans Day, I think of my grandfather, Sergeant N.J. Masterson. He joined the Army on Friday the 13th. He was always quick to point out, I joined on Friday the 13th, 13th of September, 1940. He arrived in the Philippine Islands on November the 1st of 1940. And if you know about your military history, especially your World War II history, you'll know that prior to December of 1941, Corregidor in the Philippines in general was a really, really nice place to be. It was almost a tropical paradise. That ended on December the 7th. He was assigned to Battery Crockett on Fort Mills there on Corregidor as a member of Bravo Battery, 59th Coastal Artillery Corps. Once the Japanese began attacking the Philippines in Corregidor, they fought pretty much 24 hours a day until they were finally captured on May 6th of 1942. And from that point until August of 1945, he was in a prison camp in Manchuria. He carried the internal scars, not the outward scars, but the internal scars for the rest of his life. I think of an old neighbor who would not talk about his service in Korea except to say from time to time, "At least I'm not freezing and chosen." I think of the father of one of my high school friends who at 20 years of age left this area, soon arrived in Saigon, February 1968, just in time for Tet. Came home 1 year later with no recognition, no parades, and no thanks. I also think of the thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that have served since 9/11. Many of these post-9/11 veterans enlisted after the attacks, knowing full well that their enlistment would lead to combat. One example of a person like that is Truman's own Sergeant Eric Smallwood, who served in Alpha Company, 875th Engineer Battalion. On May 26, 2007, he was the driver of a Humvee that was struck by an improvised explosive device and lost his life. Today, there are roughly 18 million veterans living, only approximately 7% of the population. But the number of veterans in the U.S. is shrinking. The high point was in 1980 when the number of veterans was approximately 28 million. Of the 16 million who served from 1941 to 1945, only approximately 200,000 are still with us. The largest population of veterans today are the veterans that served during the Vietnam War. The second largest population are those who served after 9/11. Where do we find such men and women? Where do we find people like this? Soldiers that will face an improvised explosive device, one of the largest casualty-producing weapons on the battlefield, from only feet away so that others won't be harmed. Soldiers that will cover the body of an already injured buddy with their own so that he won't be hit again. Soldiers that will leave cover and run through enemy fire to render aid to a fellow soldier. Where do we find men and women like that? Regardless of whether the veteran is world famous or a lifelong resident of a small town, all of these stories have a common thread. Individuals who are willing to put on a uniform, to stand in the gap, to go into harm's way, willing to lay down their life, if necessary, for the cause of freedom. For millions of Americans who they'll never meet, never know. These people and those that came before them are the people that we honor during Veterans Day. Thank you.
This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled, I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. There was a big high wall there that tried to stop me. The sign was painted, said private property, but on the backside it didn't say nothing. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.
Behind every one of our servicemen and women are sons, daughters, husbands, wives, parents, children, friends, and relatives who have also made sacrifices. We would like to ask all of the families who have supported our veterans to please stand at this time. Please accept our deepest gratitude and a special thank you. The Armed Forces Medley, also known as the Armed Force Salute, is a collection of the official songs of the 5 branches of the United States Armed Forces.
At this time, we would like to salute all the men and women who have served in every branch of our armed services. We ask, as the video plays the Armed Forces Medley, we invite those of you who have served or who are currently serving to please stand and join as your song is presented. United States Navy. United States Marine Corps. United States Army.
We want to say a very special thank you to all our veterans, but at this time, if we do have any World War II veterans, we would like for them to stand if we have any World War II veterans. I know we had a couple that thought they were going to be able to make it. I'm not sure if they were or not, but we want to thank each person here today, and we have just a couple other things, but thank you.
I'd like to remind everybody after the closing of the ceremony, there are snacks and refreshments in the foyer. On behalf of the Nettleton Public Schools, I'd like to thank each of you for your service and sacrifice. Thank you for attending the NHS East Veterans Day program. God bless each of you.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam, God bless America, my home.